I was the witness who put Vesper Lang in the dock, and I did it on purpose, and I did it angry. And I did not find out until the 11th day of the trial that she had spent the previous 14 months quietly arranging the entire world so that I would be the one person in it who could not be touched. I was 26, and Omega, a junior forensic accountant, the kind of person who is hired to read the numbers nobody else wants to read, who sits in a windowless room with 3 monitors and a cold cup of tea, and finds the one transaction in 400,000 that does not belong. The woman in the dock, the woman I had agreed to testify against in the financial crimes court of a gray old city that has been laundering and prosecuting money in roughly equal measure for 300 years, was Vesper Lang. She was 39. She was an alpha.
Welcome, everyone. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel.
She had built Lang Holdings out of nothing in 15 years into one of the most respected private investment houses in the country. And then, 18 months before I took the stand, the regulators had come through the doors at 7 in the morning with forensic warrants. And at the center of the case, they were building the keystone, the signature, the one set of initials on the one set of documents that turned a regulatory mess into a criminal fraud, was me, Cleo Marsh. My initials, my sign-off, my careful little hand at the bottom of the transfers that had moved 40 million through a structure I had been told was legitimate and had, God help me, believed. I'm going to tell you about the 11th day, when the defense entered a single document into evidence and the entire courtroom turned to look at me, the way you look at a person who has just walked off a cliff she built herself. But I have to back up, because the 11th day only makes sense if you understand the 14 months before it, and the 14 months only make sense if you understand who I was when Vesper Lang first looked at me across a conference table and saw, before I did, exactly how this was going to end. If you want to hear the parts of this story I cannot tell on YouTube, the uncensored version, it is on my Patreon, link in the description. Tell us where you are watching from and subscribe. Let me tell you who I was, because the whole thing turns on it. I grew up in a flat over a betting shop in a hard part of a hard city, the daughter of an Omega mother who cleaned and a father I never met. My mother's theology, the one she pressed into me before she pressed anything else, was that the world is a machine for grinding down people like us, and that the only protection a quiet Omega girl has is to be so precise, so correct, so utterly without error, that the machine can never find a tooth to catch her on. Be perfect, she told me, because perfect is the only thing they can't take. So I was perfect. I was the scholarship girl who never missed a class, the trainee who never missed a decimal, the Omega who took the strong suppressants every morning so that no firm would ever look at me and see anything but a clean, reliable instrument for finding other people's mistakes. I was very, very good. By 25, I was the youngest senior analyst the firm had ever certified, and I had built my entire life on a single load-bearing belief, which was that if I was careful enough, nothing bad could reach me through my own work. Vesper Lang reached me through my own work. That is the part I could not forgive. For 14 months. That is the part the anger was made of. I had been seconded to Lang Holdings for 8 months as part of an external audit, a routine thing, a clean firm checking a cleaner one, or so everyone believed. I met Vesper Lang on my 3rd day, in a glass conference room 40 floors above the river, and her scent reached me before she did, the way an apex alpha's always does. Except hers was not the cold iron menace I had braced for. It was rain on warm iron and strong black tea, and it arrived 2 seconds ahead of her and made something in my chest, some animal I had spent my whole life starving, sit up and pay attention. She was tall and unhurried, and she wore charcoal with no jewelry and a thin steel pen clipped inside her jacket that she never seemed to use, and she sat down across from me and the senior partners and listened to 40 minutes of audit findings without saying a word. And at the end, she looked past every alpha and beta in the room and asked the one question to me, the junior, the Omega, the instrument, Miss Marsh. You found the discrepancy in the Halloran structure on your 2nd day. Nobody else found it in 3 years. I should have lied. The careful answer, the perfect answer, was to credit the team. I did not credit the team. I was tired, and her scent was in the room, and some part of me my mother had spent 25 years trying to drown wanted for once to be seen by the most powerful person at the table and not flinch. And so I told her the truth. Because everyone else was reading it as a balance sheet, I read it as a sentence. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, in a voice with none of the boardroom in it at all, "No." And she stood up and ended the meeting, and the next morning a request came through official channels for the external audit to second me to Lang Holdings full-time, indefinitely, reporting directly to the office of the chief executive. I told myself it was the best professional opportunity of my life. I told myself it was about the numbers. I have had a long time since to think about how much of what we tell ourselves is just the careful answer we give before we are ready to give the true one. I want to tell you about those 8 months, because the trial makes Vesper Lang sound like a strategist who arranged me like a piece on a board, and the 8 months are the proof that she was not that, or not only that. That before she was the woman who filed a sealed claim to shelter me, she was a woman who learned the way I took my tea and started having it sent up without my asking. Who read every memo I wrote and sent back sometimes a single line in the margin in a hand so precise it could have been mine. Who once, when I had been at my 3 monitors for 19 hours chasing a structure that would not resolve, came into my windowless room at 2 in the morning with no reason that any organizational chart could explain, and sat down in the spare chair and said nothing, and then put her finger on a single line on the middle screen and said, "There," and she was right, and she left. And I sat in the dark in the smell of rain and warm iron she left behind, and understood that I was in trouble of a kind my mother had never warned me about, because my mother had only ever warned me about the machine, and had never once told me what to do about a person. We were never anything. I need to say that plainly, because the easy version of this story has us secretly together for 8 months, and we were not. We never touched. She never said a word that could not have been said in a deposition. What we had was smaller and more dangerous than an affair. We had a habit of recognition. She would arrive at a problem 2 seconds before I finished describing it. I would have the document she wanted open before she asked for it. In meetings full of senior alphas, she would let the room argue itself in circles and then look, at the end, at me, the junior, the omega, and ask the one question that cut it open. And I would answer it honestly every time. The one place in my entire careful life where I did not give the careful answer first. That was the affair. The affair was that for 8 months, in a glass building full of people performing competence, 2 women told each other the truth about numbers. And neither of us ever said out loud that we both knew it had stopped being about numbers somewhere around the 2nd month. I crushed it down. I was very practiced at crushing things down. And the whole time, underneath the building, Roderick Vale was watching me read the truth about his structures and deciding what he was going to do to the Omega who could not stop telling it. Here is what was actually happening inside Lang Holdings, while I sat in my windowless room reading sentences that didn't parse. I did not know it then. I know it now, in the way you come to know the shape of a room only after someone turns the light on. And the trial was the light. Lang Holdings had a cancer in it, and the cancer had a name, and the name was Roderick Vale, the chief financial officer, an alpha, 20 years older than Vesper, a man who had been at the firm since before it was anything, and who had decided, somewhere in those years, that he had built it and she had merely been the face, and that he was owed. Vale had been quietly bleeding the firm for the better part of a decade, moving client money through a lattice of shell structures so elegant and so patient that no regulator and no auditor had ever pulled the thread, until a junior Omega on a routine secondment read one of his transfers as a sentence and found that it didn't parse. I found the thread on a Tuesday. I did not know what I had found. I took it, the way you are trained to, up the chain, except the chain at Lang Holdings, for anything touching the CFO's structures, ran through a sign-off protocol that put a junior analyst's initials at the bottom of the very transfers she was flagging. A protocol Vale had designed years before for exactly this purpose, so that if the thread were ever pulled, The hand at the bottom of the documents would belong to whoever pulled it. I pulled it. My hand went to the bottom of it. And Roderick Vale, who had watched me for 8 months the way a spider watches the edge of its web, moved within 72 hours to make me the author of his entire decade of theft. Vesper found out 4 days after I did. She found out because I had also, being perfect, being careful, sent a single flagging memo to the office of the chief executive to her, and she had read it at 11 o'clock at night in her glass office, and she had understood in about 90 seconds 3 things that took me 14 months and a criminal trial to understand. She understood that Vale had been robbing her firm for 10 years. She understood that the structure was built so that the blame would fall, fully and criminally, on the junior Omega whose initials were at the bottom. And she understood that the Omega did not know yet, that I was sitting in my windowless room believing, with the whole force of the only faith my mother ever gave me, that being careful had kept me safe. Let me tell you about the Tuesday, because it is the hinge the whole machine turned on, and I lived through it without knowing it was the most important day of my life. It was an ordinary Tuesday. I had been reading a tranche of inter-entity transfers in the Halloran substructure for 2 days, and there was one, a single movement of 3.2 million, through a Luxembourg intermediary to a Cypriot holding and back through a Jersey trust, that kept catching, the way a word catches when you read it too many times and it stops looking like a word. Everyone before me had read it as a tax efficiency loop, which is what it was built to look like, and which is a thing that exists and is legal and is boring. I read it as a sentence, the way I read everything. And the sentence had a clause in it that did no work. There was a step in the loop that moved nothing, hedged nothing, saved no tax. A step that existed only to add a name to the chain of custody. And the name it added was a junior analyst's sign-off, mine, on a routing I had never seen, generated by a protocol I had never been shown. I sat there at 2 in the afternoon on an ordinary Tuesday, and I felt the floor of my careful life tilt very slightly. The way it tilts the instant before you understand a thing you cannot un-understand. And I did the perfect thing, the careful thing, the thing my mother raised me to do. I documented it. I flagged it. I sent it up. I did not know that the protocol which had put my name in that chain had been built years before by a man who had been waiting most of a decade for exactly one junior analyst to be exactly careful enough to pull exactly this thread so that the pulling and the blame would arrive at the same set of initials. I had walked perfectly, carefully, without a single error, directly into the one trap in the entire building designed to catch the kind of person who makes no errors. That is the thing about being perfect that my mother never told me, because she did not know it. A machine built by a patient enough enemy does not catch you on your mistakes. It catches you on your virtues. Roderick Vale did not need me to slip. He needed me to be exactly as good as I was, and I was. And on an ordinary Tuesday at 2 in the afternoon, I sprang his trap by doing the one thing I had spent my whole life learning to do correctly. And 72 hours later, while I sat at my 3 monitors, believing I had done my job, Vale moved, accelerated a quarter's worth of transfers through my dormant sign-off authority, backdated 3 approvals, and turned a single flagged anomaly into a documented pattern of a junior Omega authorizing 40 million in movements over 18 months. By the Friday, on paper, in the only language the machine reads, the fraud was mine. I did not feel it happen. That is the horror of it. I went home that Friday and slept the clean sleep of a person who has done the careful thing. And 4 floors above me in a glass office, a woman read a memo at 11 at night and understood in 90 seconds that I was already invisibly ruined, and began, in silence, to ruin herself instead. She did not tell me. That is the thing I've had to make my peace with. She had 90 seconds of understanding at 11 o'clock at night, and she made a decision in those 90 seconds that cost her everything she had built. And she did not tell me because telling me would have made me a participant in what she was about to do. And a participant can be charged, and the entire total point of everything Vesper Lang did for the next 14 months was that I would never, under any circumstance, be chargeable for anything. So she did 3 things in silence over 14 months, while I sat 15 feet away and slowly came to hate her. The first thing she did was take the fall. When the regulators came through the doors, they came expecting to find a junior analyst fraud with a CEO who had failed to supervise. What they found instead was Vesper Lang, in a series of interviews conducted without me ever knowing they happened, methodically taking ownership of the architecture of the entire scheme. She told them the structures were strategic. She told them the sign-off protocol was hers. She told them, in the flat, certain voice she used for the worst news, that any junior initials at the bottom of any document were there because she had directed the protocol that put them there, and that the responsibility ran to her office, to her chair, to her. She walked the most respected reputation in the country's private finance directly into a criminal dock, on purpose, sentence by careful sentence, to move the weight of 40 million stolen pounds off a 26-year-old Omega and onto herself. I did not know she was doing this. From where I sat, in those first terrible months, it looked like something else entirely. It looked like the most powerful alpha I had ever known, watching the regulators circle the firm and saying nothing to me, doing nothing for me, while my initials sat at the bottom of the documents and my name began to appear in the case files, and my whole perfect life, the only protection my mother had ever taught me, came apart in my hands. It looked like betrayal. It looked specifically like the oldest betrayal there is. The powerful one protecting herself and letting the instrument take the weight. And every day that Vesper Lang said nothing to me, every day she walked past my windowless room without stopping, every day her rain and iron scent crossed the floor and the starved animal in my chest lifted its head and I crushed it back down, every one of those days, the thing I felt for her curdled 1 degree further, from whatever it had been on the 3rd day into something hard and cold and ready to be used. The prosecutors used it. That was the second thing. And it was not Vesper's doing, it was theirs. And it was clever. When the state realized that Vesper Lang was going to take the entire weight of the case onto herself, they had a problem. Because a clean confession from a powerful defendant who insists on her own total guilt is, paradoxically, a weak case. Juries do not trust a martyr. What the state needed was a witness, an insider, someone whose own hand was on the documents, who could stand up and say I was there. I signed, and she directed me. Someone whose testimony would turn Vesper's noble flat confession into a living, corroborated human crime. They needed me, and they had in their hands the perfect lever, my own initials. They came to me 11 months in, 2 prosecutors, and my own terrified lawyer, and they laid it out with great gentleness. Your hand is on these documents, Miss Marsh. We can prosecute you as a principal, accessory to a 40 million pound fraud, 10 years minimum, or you can testify that you acted under the direction of Vesper Lang and walk away with immunity. They did not have to lean on it. They did not have to mention my mother or the flat over the betting shop or the 25 years of being perfect so the machine could never catch a tooth on me. The machine had caught a tooth, and the only hand reaching out to pull me free was the state's. And the price of the hand was that I stand up in open court and put the weight back onto Vesper Lang, the woman who I believed had put it on me in the first place. I want to tell you what those 11 months were like before I said yes, because the anger did not arrive all at once. It was built slowly, the way Vail built his structures, one quiet beam at a time. And the person who built it without meaning to was the woman trying hardest to protect me. When the regulators came through the doors at 7 in the morning, I was at my 3 monitors. I am always at my 3 monitors. I watched them move through the floor with their warrants and their boxes, and I felt, God help me, a kind of vindication because I had flagged the structure. I had done the perfect careful thing. I had sent the memo up the chain. And surely, now the machine would see that the hand at the bottom of the documents had also been the hand that raised the alarm. That is not how the machine works. By noon, my access was suspended. By the end of the week, my name was in a case file. By the end of the month, my own firm had quietly seconded me back and then quietly suggested I take leave. And I sat in the flat I rented 2 streets from the bedding shop my mother used to clean above. And I watched the only protection I had ever been taught: be perfect, be careful, be without error, fail completely in real time, while the documents with my initials at the bottom did their slow work in rooms I was not allowed into. And Vesper said nothing. That was the beam that built the anger, laid down day after day. I would see her in those first months, before they cut my access entirely, across the floor in the lift, once in the lobby 40 floors down, her rain and iron scent reaching me 2 seconds ahead of her the way it always had, the starved animal in my chest lifting its head the way it always did. And she would meet my eyes and say nothing, do nothing, offer nothing, and turn away. I did not know she was, in those exact weeks, sitting in interview rooms methodically confessing to a decade of theft she did not commit in order to lift the weight off me. I knew only that the most powerful person I had ever told the truth to was watching me drown and choosing every single day to let me. I built a whole architecture of hatred out of that silence, beam by beam. And it was a good architecture, every joint of it sound, every sentence of it parsing. And it was wrong. Wrong from the foundation, wrong in a way I could not see, because the one fact that would have collapsed it was the one fact she would die before she let me hold. I said yes. I want to be honest about how I said yes. I did not say it in fear, or not only in fear. I said it in anger. I said yes to the prosecutors with a cold, clean satisfaction that frightens me to remember, because I believed I was finally, after a lifetime of being the instrument, going to be the hand that closed instead of the hand that got caught. And I was going to close it on the alpha, who had reached into my careful, perfect life through the one door I thought I had locked, and used me, and left me to drown. I signed the cooperation agreement. I prepared my testimony. For 3 months, I built, sentence by sentence, the most precise and damning account a forensic accountant has ever given of another woman's guilt, and every sentence parsed. And I was proud of how well they parsed. And I did not know that I was building the one weapon on earth that could undo the only thing keeping me safe. Because the third thing Vesper Lang had done, in silence, in the first week, before the regulators ever came through the doors, was claiming. I have to explain what that means in this country, in this law, because it is not what it means in the stories. In our law, a bond is not only a private thing between 2 people. It is a registered thing. An alpha and an omega who bond may lodge the bond with the state, and a lodged bond carries, among its older and stranger provisions, one that comes down to us from a darker century and has never been struck from the books: spousal testimonial privilege. A registered bonded omega cannot be compelled to testify against her bonded alpha, cannot be charged as an accessory to the alpha's directed acts, is, in the eye of the law, 1/2 of a single protected entity, and the state may not split that entity against itself. Vesper Lang lodged a registered bond claim on me in the first week, before the warrants, before any of it. She did it the only way our law allows it to be done, unilaterally in extremis. A protective claim, lodged by an alpha to shelter an omega believed to be in legal jeopardy, valid and binding from the moment of registration, requiring the omega's ratification only to become permanent but fully protective from the instant it is filed. She filed it sealed. She filed it so that it would sit in the registry, invisible, doing its one silent job, making me, Cleo Marsh, legally unchargeable and legally uncompellable, 1/2 of a protected entity, untouchable by the machine that had finally caught its tooth. And then she said nothing, because here is the trap, the beautiful, terrible trap of what she did. A protective bond claim shelters the omega only so long as the omega does not waive it, and an omega cannot waive a privilege she does not know she has. The prosecutors, when they came to me with their gentle, terrible offer, were required by law to search the bond registry, and they found nothing because Vesper had filed it sealed under a provision that hides a protective claim from all parties, including the prosecution, including the omega, precisely so that the shelter cannot be used as leverage against either of them. They did not know I was protected. I did not know I was protected. And so when they offered me immunity in exchange for my testimony, I, uncompellable, unchargeable, already sheltered, already safe, already in the eye of the law, the one person in that entire case the state could not lay a finger on, I signed away the shelter I did not know I had and agreed to testify against the woman who had given it to me in order to buy a safety I already possessed, at the cost of the only thing that could destroy her. Because a protective claim has one final provision. If the sheltered Omega, of her own free and knowing will, testifies against the Alpha who sheltered her, the claim does not merely lapse. It inverts. It becomes, in the eye of the law, evidence of the very thing the Alpha denied, that she directed the Omega, that she controlled her, that the bond was not protection, but coercion. My testimony, the moment I gave it, would not only convict Vesper Lang of the fraud she had falsely confessed to. It would convict her of bonding and coercing a junior employee to commit it. It would take the noble lie she had told to save me and turn it into the worst version of itself. She knew that. She had always known that. And she let me walk toward that stand for 3 months, saying nothing, because the only thing that could have stopped me was telling me what she'd done. And telling me what she'd done would have made me, once again, a participant, a person who knew, a person the machine could catch. She would rather have been convicted of coercing me than have me know one fact that could be used to charge me. I found that out on the 11th day. The 11th day. I had given 4 days of testimony already. I had been precise. I had been, God forgive me, good. I had stood in the box and read Vesper Lang's firm to the jury as a sentence, and every sentence parsed. And I had watched her sit in the dock in charcoal with no jewelry and the thin steel pen clipped inside her jacket, and listened to me unmake her with an expression I had read for 4 days as the cold indifference of a woman who had used me and been caught. I know now it was not indifference. I have learned the difference since between a face that feels nothing and a face that is holding everything. On the 11th day, I learned it in open court, in front of the jury and the press and my own mother, who had come, who sat in the 3rd row in her good coat, who had taught me that being perfect was the only protection, and had lived to watch the perfection become the knife. I should tell you what the first 10 days were, because they are the part I am least proud of, and the part that explains why the 11th landed the way it did. For 4 days, I gave evidence, and for the 6 days after, I sat behind the prosecution and watched the case I had built do its work, and I was, I have to say it, magnificent. That is the ugliest word I own, and it is the true one. I had spent 25 years being perfect, and for the first time in my life, perfection had a target instead of a wall, and I was very, very good at it. I read Vesper Lang's firm to the jury as a sentence that did not parse, and then I made it parse in the only direction the prosecutors wanted, and every number landed, and every structure resolved. And the press wrote that the junior analyst was the most devastating financial witness the court had seen in a generation. And my mother read those reports, in her good coat, in her small flat, and was, I think, proud, in the way she had taught me to understand pride. As the machine finally failing to catch me, as the instrument finally being the one to cut. And across the room, Vesper Lang sat in the dock in charcoal with no jewelry, and the thin steel pen clipped inside her jacket. And she watched me unmake her, and she never once looked away. And I read her stillness as contempt. I had 4 days at close range to study her face, and I read every hour of it wrong. I thought the unblinking attention was an alpha refusing to show weakness. I know now it was the opposite. It was a woman who had decided that if I was going to have to do this terrible thing, the least she could do, the only thing left she could give me, was to be the one steady point in the room while I did it. The way she had been the steady point at the end of every circling meeting, the one who looked at me and let me tell the truth. She gave me her steadiness while I used it to destroy her. I did not understand that until the 11th day either. There was a great deal I did not understand until the 11th day. I was, it turns out, only ever perfect at the numbers. The sentences about people I had been reading wrong my entire life. The defense had called no witnesses. For 11 days, Vesper's barrister had cross-examined gently, almost absently, conceding everything, fighting nothing. And the court had begun to treat the verdict as a formality. And then, on the 11th morning, the defense rose and applied to enter a single document into evidence, sealed, retrieved by court order from the National Bond Registry, and the prosecutor objected, and the judge read it in chambers. And when the judge came back, his face had changed, and he ordered the document read into the record. And the clerk stood and read out the registration of a sealed protective bond claim, lodged by Vesper Margaret Lang upon Cleo Marsh, dated 4 days before the regulators ever entered the building, sheltered as sealed and, until the moment its beneficiary testified against its grantor, completely, silently protective. I did not understand it at first. I am a forensic accountant. I read it the way I read everything, as a sentence. And for one merciful moment, the sentence did not parse. And then it parsed. And I understood all at once, in open court, with my hand still resting on the rail of the witness box, what Vesper Lang had done. I understood that I had never been in danger, that my mother was wrong, that perfect had not protected me, that nothing I had ever done had protected me, that the only thing standing between me and 10 years in a cell had been a single sealed document filed by a woman who had then walked into a criminal dock and let me believe she'd betrayed me for 14 months, rather than tell me one fact that might have made me chargeable. I understood that the cold, clean satisfaction I had felt signing the cooperation agreement had been the satisfaction of a drowning woman accepting a hand from the state, while the person who had already, silently, lifted her entirely out of the water, watched, and said nothing. I understood that I had spent 4 days on the stand destroying the one person who had ever, in my entire careful life, looked at me and decided, before I gave her any reason, before I ratified anything, before I even knew her, that I was hers to protect. And I understood the last thing, the thing the document did in the very act of being read, that by testifying, I had inverted the claim, that the sealed shelter was now, by operation of the law, an instrument of her conviction, that I had not only failed to save her, I had become the proof of the worst crime they could hang on her, the coercion, the controlled omega, the bond as a weapon. The document that had protected me was now, because I had spoken, the document that would bury her. And there was nothing in the law that could unspeak 4 days of testimony. I looked up from the rail and across the courtroom, and Vesper Lang was looking at me, finally, openly, for the first time in 14 months, with nothing held in her face at all. And what was in it was not blame. I have gone over it 1,000 times, and there was no blame in it anywhere. There was only the thing I had been too angry and too frightened and too well trained to see for 14 months. The thing that had been there on the 3rd day across a glass table. The thing she had filed in a registry in a single week and never once mentioned. She had decided I was worth more than everything she had built, and she had been at peace with the cost since the first night. And the only thing in her face as the document that doomed her was read aloud was relief. Relief that at last, too late, in the worst possible way, I finally knew. I am not going to tell you the verdict yet, because the verdict is not the part that mattered, and because I have learned from Vesper Lang that the order in which you let someone understand a thing is itself a kind of mercy or a kind of cruelty, and I would rather give you the mercy. What mattered happened in the 90 seconds after the document was read, when the judge called a recess into the uproar and the press surged, and my own lawyer grabbed my arm, and I did the first wholly unperfect thing I had done in 26 years. I had spent my whole life being careful so the machine could not catch me, and I stood up in the witness box with the machine's full attention on me, and I asked the court, over my lawyer's frantic objection, into the record, on my own free and knowing will, the same will that had inverted the claim, to let me recall my testimony, to let me state, for the record, that I had given my evidence in ignorance of a fact that changed its entire meaning. that I had testified believing I was protecting myself from a danger I now understood had never existed, because the woman in the dock had removed it, in silence, at the cost of her own life's work, before I had done a single thing to earn it. You cannot unspeak testimony. The law is clear, and the judge told me so. Gently, the way the prosecutors had been gentle, the way everyone is gentle with an instrument that has realized what it has been used for. But you can put a second thing on the record beside the first, and I did. For 2 hours, on the 11th afternoon, I gave the testimony I should have spent 3 months preparing. The forensic account, precise, every sentence parsing, of how Roderick Vale had built a decade of theft to fall on a junior Omega's initials, and how Vesper Lang had seen it in 90 seconds at 11 o'clock at night and spent 14 months and everything she owned making sure the only hand that could not be caught was mine. I read Vale's structures to the jury as the sentences they were. I had found the threat on a Tuesday, once, not knowing what it was. On the 11th afternoon, I pulled it all the way out, in open court, knowing exactly what it was, and it was not my own initials at the bottom of it anymore. It was his. It took the jury 2 days. They acquitted Vesper Lang of the fraud. They could not do otherwise. Once the structures were read for what they were, and the protective claim was understood for what it was, a shelter, filed before any crime was even charged, by a woman who could not have been sheltering an Omega from a fraud the Omega had not yet been framed for, unless that woman already knew the fraud was coming, and already knew it was not the Omega's. The bond claim, the very document the prosecution had hoped would convict her of coercion, became instead the keystone of her defense, the proof that everything she had confessed to was a lie told to protect me, and that the truth ran the other way, all the way back to Roderick Vale. They charged Vale within the week. They charged me with nothing, because there had never, from the first sealed week, been anything they could charge me with. And the bond. I want to tell you about the bond because this is where the stories usually cheat, and I will not cheat. A protective claim, in our law, requires the Omega's ratification to become permanent. Vesper's claim, the moment the trial ended, the moment I was safe and she was free, and the entire 14-month architecture had done its work, reverted by operation of law to its unratified state, which is to say, it was mine to confirm or to let lapse freely, with no jeopardy on either side, the way she had built it from the start, so that I would never owe her a thing I had not freely chosen to give. She had claimed me to protect me. She had never once, in 14 months or in the courtroom or in the gray weeks after, asked me to be claimed. She asked me nothing. She did the most Vesper Lang thing there is, which is that she left it entirely to me, filed the reversion herself, sent me through her lawyer a single line. The claim is yours to end. It has done what I filed it to do. You are free, Cleo, in every sense the law, and I can give you. And then she stopped. No call, no appeal. The woman who had silently arranged the entire world to shelter me would not lift one finger to arrange the one thing she actually wanted, because wanting it from me, taking it, asking for it, was the single thing her whole protective architecture had been built to make impossible. She had spent 14 months making sure I owed her nothing. She was not going to ruin it now by letting me feel that I did. I want to tell you about the gray weeks between the verdict and the day I went to find her, because they were the hardest weeks of my life and the most important. And because they are the part where I finally did the work she had done for me 14 months before, the work of deciding in silence with no guarantee of return what a person is worth. I was free. That was the strange, unbearable fact of those weeks. Acquitted of everything, charged with nothing. My name cleared in the same press that had called me a devastating witness. My career, if I wanted it, entirely recoverable. The machine had let me go. Everything my mother had ever promised would protect me had failed, and I had been saved anyway, by the one thing she had no theology for, And now I sat in my rented flat 2 streets from the betting shop, and I was safe and clear and free, and I had never felt so much like an instrument in my life. Because being saved is not the same as being chosen. And I had been saved, magnificently, totally, at ruinous cost, by a woman I had spent 14 months hating and 4 days destroying, and the not knowing what to do with. That was worse than the trial. In the trial, I had at least been certain. In the gray weeks, I was certain of nothing except the one forensic fact I could no longer make unparse: that no one in my entire life had ever looked at me the way Vesper Lang had looked at me across that glass table on the 3rd day, before I had done a single thing to earn it, and decided I could have done nothing. I want to be honest that nothing was available, and easy, and defensible. She had filed the reversion. The claim was lapsing on its own. I owed her, by her own careful construction, precisely nothing. And I could have taken the freedom she had bought me and walked into the recoverable career and the clean, clear life and never seen her again. And no one would have called me ungrateful because she had made certain there was nothing to be grateful for, only something to choose. And that, in the end, was the thing that moved me off the chair. For 26 years, I had been the instrument, the careful hand, the one who did the correct thing and waited to see if the correct thing would be enough. And I understood in the gray weeks that walking away would be the most perfect, most careful, most instrumental thing I had ever done. The safe answer, the wall. And that for once in my life, I did not want to give the careful answer first. So I went to find her. That was mine to do. And I did it. I found her in the empty shell of Lang Holdings, 40 floors above the river, in the glass conference room where she had asked me on my 3rd day how I had found the thread, packing 15 years of a built thing into boxes because a reputation acquitted is not a reputation restored. And she was, quietly, finished in that city. She looked up when my scent reached the room: cut grass and old paper and cold tea. The scent I no longer drowned, because I had stopped taking the suppressants the week the trial ended, the week I stopped being a clean, reliable instrument and started being a woman. And the rain and iron came up to meet it the way it had on the 3rd day, the way it had every day for 14 months while I crushed the starved animal in my chest back down. I did not crush it down this time. I said the only thing that needed saying, which was not thank you, because thank you is what an instrument says, and was not I owe you because she had made certain I didn't, and was instead the truest forensic sentence I have ever constructed, the one that finally parsed. You decided I was worth everything you built before I'd done a single thing to deserve it. I have spent my whole life being perfect, so that no one could ever have a reason to keep me. You didn't need a reason. I'd like to give you one now. Knowingly, freely. And Vesper Lang, who had held everything in her face for 14 months, finally stopped holding it. It is 2 years later now. We do not live in that gray old city anymore. She was finished there, and I had nothing to keep me, and we went somewhere with more light and started a small thing. A forensic practice, the two of us. The alpha who built empires and the omega who reads them as sentences, hired by people who have been ground in the machine to find the one transaction in 400,000 that does not belong. I am very good at it. I have stopped apologizing for saying so. I wear my own scent now, and the clients get used to it in about a week, the way everyone gets used to everything. And the work is the same work I always did, except that now, when I find the thread, there is someone beside me who pulled an entire life apart rather than let it fall on me, and so I am not afraid anymore of what I might find at the bottom of it. Roderick Vale is serving 11 years. My mother came to live near us in the place with more light. She is old now and softer than her theology, and the first time she watched Vesper Lang reach across a table to still my nervous hand, the same small gesture every time that the powerful make for the people they have decided to keep. She said one quiet sentence to me afterward, the only revision she ever made to the faith she raised me on. She said, I told you perfect was the only protection. I was wrong, Cleo. It was never the wall that kept you. The bond is registered, ratified this time in daylight, freely on the record. The same words read into the same kind of registry, except that this time I was the one who filed it. And this time it was not a shelter against a danger. It was a choice toward a person. And the difference between those two filings is the difference between the life my mother taught me to survive and the life I actually have. I was the witness who put Vesper Lang in the dock, and I did it angry. And I was wrong about everything, and I would not undo a second of it. Not the 14 months of hating her, not the 4 days of unmaking her on the stand, not the terrible parsing moment on the 11th day when the document was read. And I understood at last what it costs to be loved by someone who would rather be convicted than let you carry a single ounce she could carry for you. I needed all of it. I needed to be the hand that closed on her so that I could become finally the hand that opens, that reaches, that chooses, that files the bond in daylight, that is not an instrument anymore. Her name is Vesper Lang. My name is Cleo Marsh. She claimed me to save me in silence before I had earned it, and I testified against her to save myself in anger before I understood it. And somewhere between those two filings, in a registry in a gray old city, two women who had each been taught that safety is a wall finally learned that it is instead a person, standing freely, knowingly, in daylight, in front of you. If you stayed to the end of this one, thank you. These stories take a long time to tell the right way, and you gave me an hour, and I know what an hour is worth. The uncensored version, the parts I couldn't tell here, the night the trial ended, the 40 floors above the river, is on the Patreon, link in the description. Tell us where you're watching from. Subscribe so the next woman's story finds you. And if you have built your whole life into a wall, I understand. But watch sometimes for the person who decides, before you've earned it, to stand in front of it. Let them, then choose them back, in daylight, on the record. That part is yours.